Hello my precious little dragons, welcome back to my channel. It has been like 4 months since I filmed a video. It is almost the end of winter break and I am attempting to pre-film before the semester starts. Today we're in for a chaotic book review. Anyway, so if you're wondering where I've been attempting to survive the notoriously most difficult, hardest semester of my graduate program, which I did. Cool. It was just extremely intense as my first time being a clinician, in addition to graduate level statistics, in addition to other classes, in addition to trying to get my second year research problem off in addition to trying to get my second year research project off the ground, in addition to TAing, in addition to life. So, yeah, last semester was not a good one for filming videos. So now that I have slept through basically the entire month of December, and now that it's January, I will attempt to be filming and editing with some regularity. Anyway, y'all are here for a book look, and not gonna lie, it may be a little chaotic because I read so many books last year that I didn't know where to start, so I just kind of chose one of the last 10 that I read, and I'm just gonna try and talk about it and create a makeup look without having planned absolutely anything. So again, we're in for a slightly more chaotic book look than normal. Anyway, if you're new here, hi, my name's Calista. I am a psychology graduate student who attempts to do self-care with books and makeup, and I especially like to do book looks where I talk about books that I've read and create a makeup look based on them, so that's what this is. I'm sorry, I feel so frazzled. I literally don't even know how to film anymore. This is great. Today's book that I'm going to be doing a book look on, now that you've had that very long-winded me trying to reintroduce myself how to film a YouTube video. So today's book is going to be Girl, Serpent, Thorn by Melissa Bashardoust. So what is Girl, Serpent, Thorn about? So the whole tagline of the book is sometimes the princess is the monster. So Girl, Serpent, Thorn is a book that is heavily based off of Persian mythology. And we start off with Soraya, who is our princess in question, and she has been cursed her entire life that everyone she touches dies. She's quite literally poison. And she has like these green veins that like run under her skin, so she always feels like she's going to slightly go out of control and lose like what little control over her curse that she does have. And basically the story she's been told by her mom is that her mom rescued a div, which is sort of like that world's version of like not quite a demon, but sort of. And then she ran into another one that same night in the forest who was mad at her for freeing this other div and cursed her firstborn daughter, which is Soraya. So Soraya has a twin brother, Sarush, who is going to be the next Shah of their kingdom. Soraya is essentially hidden away in the palace. Very few people know of her really. Like, there's just kind of rumors of a princess who's kept hidden away from everyone. So the book starts right before Sarush's wedding to Soraya's childhood friend Lale, and then it like takes off and explodes from there with a div who's in the dungeon and a man who is surprisingly not afraid of Soraya. So of course we're going to start off with just kind of general thoughts. Last of this eyeshadow primer, oh my gosh. So I went into the story knowing essentially nothing about, you know, Persian culture, mythology, anything like that. So one thing I really appreciated about the story was that you didn't necessarily have to have like a deep in-depth knowledge of any of that in order to appreciate and fall in love with the story. Something that made it really nice, I listened to the audiobook, which was really, really well done. I really loved the audiobook. One thing I appreciated was the author's note at the end, which went in a little bit more in depth about the mythology, even some of the language things, like so some of the characters' names in the story really connect to what they are or the roles that they play in the story, which I really liked. So I thought it was extremely well written. I connected so much to a lot of the characters. It's obviously super fun to see a fantasy that is not just from a European medieval perspective, so I always love seeing fantasies like that. And then there's also some amazing LGBTQ rep in our main character who's bi, which is awesome. Not really a spoiler, they kind of let you know early on. So there is a little bit of romance in the book, but for the most part the plot is more focused on Soraya's finding her identity and like her coming into her own or learning to accept herself, and that's a lot more of what the plot focuses on. The romance is like, it's present, but it's not overshadowing the main points of the story. It supports the main points of the story, which is really lovely. Before we get started into the makeup look, I want to give you the content warnings for the book. So there's some content warnings for emotional abuse, gaslighting, and neglect that are all pretty present throughout the story. So if that's something that is really difficult or triggering for you to read, this may not be the best book for you. Otherwise, I just wanted to give that warning up front, and obviously we'll be talking a little bit about it as we get more in depth and into the spoiler section of the review. We're going to start off with the Sydney Grayson Temptalia Radiant Reflection palette. This is the fun of getting a not prepared me trying to do a book review, come up with a makeup look on the spot, so we will see how chaotic this gets. So we're just going to start out with something neutral in the corner there. Dearest Constance. Alright, so the first thing I wanted to sort of get into was the characters. So the main ones that you really focus on are Soraya, of course, and then Azad, who's the man who is not afraid of Soraya, which is quite unheard of for her. And then Parvana, who is the div in the dungeon at the beginning of the story. So those are sort of, I would say, your three main characters, but even the supporting cast is all very interesting. And I like that you can always tell that they have their own motivations and backstories and complexities that affect how they interact with Soraya and how they interact within the story and move the plot forward or hold the plot back. And I think that's one of the tells of a really, really good, solid character writer, when you're able to tell, even when characters that don't get a lot of page time, that these are really deep, complex, rounded, real people, that they're not just flat characters that exist solely to support the main character. So I really appreciate that about a specific book. I'm gonna go into Sublime Reverie. So Soraya is obviously our main character, so we get to know her best. I really loved her character. I thought she was always interesting. She made a lot of mistakes in the book, or just kind of decisions that backfired. She was trying to do the right thing and it ended up majorly not being the right thing to do. But you always sympathized with her, you always wanted her to succeed, for her to find peace with herself, to continue going forward. I always found myself rooting for her and wanting the absolute best for her character. As mentioned before, she's bi, and that does come to play in a decent amount of the story. What's really nice is that it's not a world where LGBTQ rep is like frowned upon, so really the main conflict in the story is still able to be maintained as her having this curse of the div on her being poisonous to the touch. So she's very much an outsider and has this like outcastness on her. Her being LGBT is not part of that. Her being bi is something that just is able to exist in the story without question. It's not something that's frowned upon in that society or in that world, at least as far as this specific story is concerned. So any hangups that Soraya might have with her sexuality is more to do with the fact that she's literally poisonous to the touch and thinks of herself as like partway between being a monster and a woman. So that has more to do with the conflict in the story than anything else. The other characters in the story, so Azad, I think I will talk, well, Azad and Parvana, their characters are both so fully intertwined with the plot, but especially Azad, that I don't feel like I can talk about him without getting into spoilers, so I'll touch a little bit on Parvana and some of the side characters before getting into the plot, because Azad is, yeah, Azad is Azad. So, yeah, that turned out interesting. Now we're going to get into more of the spoiler section, so I'm going to be talking about Azad and some of the specifics of the plot that I really liked. So if you don't want to see spoilers, I would suggest skipping to the timestamp down below for the final look and thoughts. If you don't mind spoilers, or if you've already read the book, then go ahead and stick around, obviously, because Azad is an interesting case. Oh boy. Talking about him is just so weird, because kind of from the moment he first stepped on the scene, I didn't trust him. He was too nice. And I was like, yep, there's my gut being right again. Because yeah, he was not nice. He is
he's the bad guy. But he's a complicated bad guy, which is always nice. So instead of just having a guy that you want dead the entire time, you're first built up with, you know, he's nice, he cares for Soraya, he sees her for, you know, more than just her poisonous skin. And so Soraya is pretty easily taken in by this because, you know, when you're basically neglected your entire life and everyone is at least mildly terrified of you and you feel like no one cares what happens to you, yeah, the first time you're shown any modicum of kindness, you're probably gonna fall for it regardless of if the person is actually genuinely kind or not. So the interesting thing about Azad is, even though he definitely is emotionally abusive, he's a manipulator, it's interesting because you do kind of end up with this weird situation of him caring for her in his own very twisted, dark way, which makes it, I think, more realistic, because you never just have a villain who's entirely evil. You never just have, I think, an abuser who's entirely evil. They're going to have these moments of humanity, these moments of connection, these moments where they think that they're doing the right thing, where they think that they're really showing you genuine love, but they're not. Because their idea of love, their idea of a healthy relationship, of all of this stuff is just so twisted that they literally have no concept of what healthy love, what healthy connection looks like. Zero concept. And Azad absolutely fits into that category. What's harder is that, again, he is a master manipulator. So even though he does have these few moments where you know he's being genuine, air quotes, in the book, they're also tied in with these moments where he's being fake genuine, where he's being too nice, where he's love bombing, where he's showing all of these classic signs of a very emotionally abusive person who's drawing this very vulnerable person in. And Soraya, again, she falls for it because she's vulnerable. She, you know, she's a very smart character. She is tough, she's strong, she's resilient, but she's vulnerable to love and affection because that's what she's lacked her entire life. And so that kind of spins the plot going. Because, of course, Azad isn't just a man who's emotionally abusive. He's a kind of half div, half man amalgamation from history that's emotionally abusive. You know, can't just be a normal guy. So this continues throughout the plot because then he's like, once he, again, he manipulates Soraya basically into doing exactly what he wants her to do so he can like take over this throne that basically he got cast out of the throne by Soraya's ancestors, and he's been quietly waiting for his comeback ever since, and he's been gathering the Deves to do his bidding, which the Deves don't like, but you know, it's for their own ends. And Azad is extremely powerful. So he does so much manipulation to make the Shah Surush vulnerable, to make the whole family vulnerable, and then immediately put all of the blame squarely onto Soraya's shoulders. So there's also this abusiveness because, of course, it's not the fact that Azad is actually the one that's taking over, that's killing people. It's, oh well, it's all your fault because, you know, you're the one who took the feather, because Soraya was really just trying to find a cure for her curse. And so you can see how he's pulling all the strings, how he's manipulating her, and it was written extremely well because, like I said, from the very get-go, I was like, he was so nice that I didn't trust him, but he was still in a lot of ways likable, which is worse because you kept finding yourself going, maybe he can be redeemed, well, maybe he's like, maybe there's more to him than this. Like, you feel yourself as the reader almost wanting to get pulled in. And then you're disgusted with yourself, or it terrifies you a little bit because, no, thanks, don't really want that. That's a little scary, bye. So there's a lot of this really, really well developed, terrifying abusiveness to Azad that is just extremely well written. And you can also tell where he's vulnerable and where he's weak, and where the evil things that he does come out of his own insecurity, out of his own vulnerabilities and weaknesses and like moral failings. Like, he's obviously still a villain. He's obviously still a bad guy. And yet there's these moments where you're sympathetic. There's these moments where you almost pity him. There's these moments of genuineness. And I love that in a villain, because in no way does it absolve all of the terrible things that he did. But you understand where he's coming from, and that's what makes a complex, unique, and fascinating villain. So that's my 2 cents about Azad. As you follow him through the story, he's just wild. He's wild. Like, I personally, like, almost every time he's on the page, or every time you listen to him, and like, again, like I said, the audiobook was so good because the narrator was able to put so much of this charm and like rope pulling, like puppetry sort of like manipulation into him. You could hear it in his voice and the way he talked to Soraya, the way he like developed this over time. And in the same way, you saw these weaknesses because he did start to fall for Soraya in a sort of like, again, in his own very weird, twisted way. So you saw Soraya start to get smarter and tried to see how she could outsmart him, how she could escape him, how she could undo all of the damage that she thought she had done, or that she did do. Because again, nothing in this book is black and white, which I love, because in certain ways, there were mistakes that Soraya made that were purely her own. There were mistakes that were made because of Azad's manipulation and were blamed on her. And then there were mistakes that were kind of both of them. And there's just absolutely no black and white in the story. Again, love it. So going on to plot, again, I think it was really, really well done. So with the plot, it always keeps you engaged, it pulls you along. There's not really down moments, especially once it gets going and basically Azad's like overthrowing of Sarush at his wedding happens. So there's a lot happening all of the time, constantly. All of the characters are basically playing this massive game of chess, trying to outsmart each other. Like, have you seen those boards where it's like 5-way chess and it just looks like pure chaos? That's this book. I do love a political intrigue book, but with like elements of danger. Like, it's not just people sitting in a room trying to vaguely outsmart each other. It's like really high stakes. It's, you know, you make one wrong move, you die kind of thing. And this is very much that kind of story. I also love seeing how, again, the main theme is Soraya coming into herself, learning to accept herself, and how that follows throughout the story, because it's sort of interesting how it tracks, because she ends up losing her powers for a while. And so she is able to experience all of these things she had never been able to before, like touch. And that was like a marvelous experience for her, but then at the same time she finds out it's not everything it's cracked up to be, because, it was actually kind of a form of protection. Like, there's multiple issues, I guess you could say, or there's multiple, like, there was more to consider than she necessarily had. And she doesn't find this out until, you know, it already appears too late. And so then she's going into all of this with suddenly more danger than she's used to, because she hated herself while she was untouchable, but now that she's touchable, she realizes, you know, life's a little bit more dangerous now. You know, she doesn't have this protection or this vulnerability, and so she's trying to find this balance of understanding who she is, what she's capable of.
which I really love.
And then you see her start to build her own plans, make her own allies, which is really fun because you can start to see where she is a foil to Azad. And this is built in very early on, where she grew up with Azad's story basically as a fairy tale, this cautionary tale, and she was terrified of the story. And once she meets him, once everything goes to crap, you know, she is worried even more about becoming him, and he compares them to each other. So he sees this connection, Soraya sees this connection, and then has to sort of come to grips with, am I the same as him? Like, am I just going to follow his same path? Am I going to do the same thing that he did? Am I, you know, like, am I more of a monster now that I'm touchable, now that I don't have this curse, than I was before? Like, she's sort of starting to grapple with all of these intrinsic moralities and trying to understand herself. And then as the book develops, she finds more of her own power and agency and realizes, no, I am not the same as Azad. I don't have to be the same as Azad, and I don't have to make the same choices he makes, and my values are different than his values. And so I think that's interesting, because I think a lot of times in a story, when you do have a foil like that, you kind of try to keep them more similar, I feel like, and in this one, it keeps them similar until it diverts. And when it diverts heavily, which I really loved personally, because it kept with this theme of Soraya finding out who she is and discovering her own agency in the world. This eye look is something else. I think I need, I don't know what I need. Do I need to outline this? Can I outline this without looking absolutely ridiculous? Okay, well, that's chaotic. Cool. So more about the plot. I really liked how the Deves were introduced and developed, how you really saw the separations between the different types of Deves, and especially with Parvana's sisters, I really loved their development, how they were built throughout the story, even before you met anyone other than Parvana. There was really nothing bad to say I have about the world building. I really loved pretty much all of it. Honestly, I just don't have anything bad to say about the story. There was nothing in there that I didn't like plot-wise, character-wise, which... hold on, I'll talk about that later. So, I loved the way that was developed. I loved the way the plot came to a conclusion and how it was able to give this satisfying answer to the story, to give an answer to Soraya's finding her identity, finding her place in the world that made sense with her character and where she had come from, and still focused on these values that mattered and didn't abandon any of the values that mattered to her in the first place, like her family, like her country, like learning how to accept herself. And I really loved at the end where she came into her own, and she does eventually get her powers back, but once she lets go of this fear that she had of not being able to control, she found she was in control. And I loved that picture. I loved that once she let go, she found she was in control. When she let go of all of these preconceptions, these fears, these terrors that she had, that's when she was truly free. So I thought that was brilliant. It's great. It's amazing. It's well done. Okay, what the heck am I doing? Could work. Might not. We'll try it. I am back, and obviously I cleaned up my under eyes. Woo. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the romance and just a little bit about the character dynamic between
Parvaneh and Soraya. Again, early on you were unsure whether you can trust her at all. There's this very real possibility that you can't trust her, especially given everything that Soraya knows of and has heard of Dives throughout her life. She believes that they are all entirely untrustworthy, that they all have like evil out for her basically. And that's part of what is difficult for her at the beginning, because really no one is telling her the full truth. No one seems to have her best interest in mind, so she's kind of floundering with what the heck she's supposed to do. So she does not know who to trust, and yet she keeps coming back to Parvaneh. And Parvaneh seems to understand her. She seems to know what she's going through, especially with being an outcast. And that really speaks to Soraya. Oh my goodness. I shouldn't be talking and doing this all at the same time, should I? And so the other thing that happens is there's sensuality built between both Soraya and Parvaneh and Soraya and Azad. And it feels drastically different between the two of them. Like, again, as I mentioned a couple times, like, just Azad, it didn't matter how nice he was, how many things he said, there was something in me that just didn't, like, it didn't sit right from the beginning. And the more I think about it, and I don't know, part of it could just be, you know, like, more the therapist in me that knows how to look out for warning signs, but I think part of it has to do with the way they connect. There was this way that Soraya connected with Parvaneh that felt mutual but not forceful. Parvaneh was never going to force Soraya to be with her, to understand her. She just existed and they worked together when they needed to. Whereas, which I don't know if that makes any sense, but it felt much more consensual, it felt much more genuine. Whereas with Azad, even before you knew who he was, it almost felt like he was pushing his way into her trust. He was trying to say all the right things, do all the right things to gain her trust and push her into doing things that weren't necessarily best for her. Whereas with Parvaneh, you could see even early on, she like suggested that Soraya do things that wouldn't benefit her, that wouldn't benefit Parvaneh, that would only benefit Soraya. And I think you just saw a lot more genuine care for well-being, as opposed to you look good with me, or you fit my idea of what needs to be with me. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but there was just something that felt different in the way that these characters interacted with each other. And so that made it, I think, a lot nicer when Soraya and Parvaneh finally got together, or finally had these romantic moments, because they felt very earned and they felt more genuine and trustworthy, even though you still had moments of not entirely knowing if Parvaneh was completely trustworthy. They still felt earned. I don't know. I just think it's interesting. Ooh, this is interesting. Good gracious. This look is a whole hot train wreck, but we're going with it. People who could do intricate line work eyeliner, I salute you, because I am high-key struggling. Okay, well, we're gonna go with, that's fine, this is good. Immediately does more. Actually, I should not have done that before I did my foundation. I don't know what I was thinking. Cool, this is great. So anyway, their relationship felt earned. I really appreciated it. Again, there was this like sensuality between the two of them, and there was no like sex scenes or anything like that, but it still felt very intimate. Like, there's a moment where Soraya is healing Parvaneh's wounds. She has wings that were basically
not completely torn off, but mostly by the torture of Azad. And so Soraya is healing those wounds, and just the way that scene was written, the way it described it was very like intimate, and like this was even before like their romance, like it was before the romance was introduced, and you still knew, like you knew it was gonna come. So I thought that that was built really well, because it was just like, oh yeah, there's gonna be romance, because whew, there's some definite romantic tension. Like to the point where even the asexual could tell. You know? You know. Yeah, I just really loved the way their relationship was developed. I don't know that that's gonna get a lot more even than it is. I'm gonna wait to do, yeah, well, I should probably just do it. Should probably just do it. I feel like I don't have a lot else to say, so I'm just gonna keep doing my makeup and put some pretty music, and then we'll be back for the final look and thoughts.
This is like almost a month later Callista. So I was editing this video and I realized I was missing like the last 2 clips that actually were my wrap up and the final look, because of course I was missing those. So yeah, we're going to be showing the pictures that I took for the cover, like the thumbnail, so you can actually see what the final look looks like. And I will very briefly tell you that if you like skipped all the things I actually talked about with the book, my main points were that I really enjoyed the book. I think the plotting was great. Everyone was like, all the characters were really well developed and they were all like moving their own chess pieces across the board. I like compared it to like that 5-way chaotic chess that you've maybe seen. And then I loved the inclusion of the Persian mythology. I got to learn more about that because that was something I was unfamiliar with. I really enjoyed that Soraya was allowed to be like bisexual without it being like a conflict in the world. Like her she had lots of conflicts in her life, but being bi wasn't one of them. And so that was, you know, it's just refreshing to see that in a fantasy world, because, you know,
we're asked to believe lots of weird stuff in fantasy, so sometimes it's just nice that we don't have to question that LGBT people can exist without oppression. You know? Same thing, like... So, anyway, I really, really, really loved it, and if you do read it, which I hope you do, I hope you love it, I hope you enjoy it. I think it is a stellar book, and it's really fun watching the character progression. I mean, there's a reason I gave it 5 stars. Just character, plot, mythology, development, intrigue, drama, everything. I mean, it just has it all. So read it, enjoy it, and I'm sorry I'm missing like the last like 5 minutes of my actual thing. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day. Stay magic, keep reading, and I love you all so much. Goodbye!